Welcome. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm Manuel Aragon. I am Lighthouse's Community Engagement Manager, and this is our visiting author reading. We'll be featuring two readers tonight, but before that, a quick announcement. You can find the list of all of our readings for LitFest 2020 in the chat bar, including tomorrow afternoon's reading, where we will be featuring some of LitFest 2020 fellows and runners-up. I'd also like to thank the SCFD, National Endowment for the Arts, Bonfie Stanton Foundation, Amazon Literary Partnership, and Colorado Creative Industries for helping to make LitFest 2020 possible. Okay, let's get started with our first reader tonight. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, essayist, and cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio. He is the author of a New York Times bestselling biography on a tribe called Quest called Go Ahead in the Rain, The Crown Ain't Worth Much, nominated for a Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, named a Best Book of 2017 by NPR, Pitchfork, Oprah Magazine, Esquire, and GQ, among others. Abdurraqib's new collection of poems, A Fortune for Your Disaster, came out last year from Tin House. And he has a forthcoming history of Black performance in the United States titled They Don't Dance No Mo. Let's welcome Hanif.
Hey everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. It's always a little weird. Ariana was talking before this about how weird it is to not be able to see people. So hopefully you're all well. I'm gonna read, it's wild because I think particularly when Black folks in America talk about timely poems, what they mean, or what I mean at least, is that the work is always timely even when it's unintentioned. And so last year, or at the end of last year, I started writing a series of poems that was considering my relationship with police officers in television shows, how I grew up thinking that police officers were cool because of how they were portrayed to me on television, and how I consumed that and internalized that and moved through a lot of my adolescence, both afraid of the police and angry at the police, but also somewhat in awe of their coolness as it was presented to me on television. So I'm gonna just read a series of poems from this series. All the poems have the same title. And so I'm just gonna get into them and then stop when I stop. All the TV shows are about cops. Perhaps if your captor knows their way around a hardwood floor, and a pair of kicks so white they ascend upon being kicked into the dark well of a bedside. Perhaps if they once stole a toothbrush from the corner store up some block that looked like your block, and perhaps if they massaged the soles of their shoes with it until the white leapt back to life during a rainy season. Maybe if your captor has good hair and the pick points somewhere north, if your captor was the architect of a mean mix and the tape rocked out of a boombox bouncing into a house party perched on a shoulder like a patient and merciful sparrow, if your captor keeps a gold rope chain in their top drawer for the nights they are not beholden to the uniform of empire, if your captor loves their mama or your mama, the distance between love and the ability to punish is a matter of perspective, says your captor, who loves the hood and sharpens their teeth along its borders. Maybe if your captor once carved their name into the brick of a building and then came to love the building more than the people in it, consider that your captor is as heartbroken as you have been once. And so what is a little blood or a cage? If you and your captor wail in the same tongue, they will say, perhaps it won't matter from where the wailing began. All the TV shows are about cops. I crave, instead, the long shot of the weary hustler at the blood-red doorway between evening and night, reaching a hand for the cold metal of a fridge that hums with its own emptiness. Yes, I have felt the sigh of the cop who goes to a comfortable house and dreams of the forest, pulsing with branches bent into what must look like gang signs to someone with a racing heart and an eager trigger. No, I will take the shot of the hustler in a room lit by a single lamp, I will take the shot from overhead that tells us the hustler is placing their stash in a box or feeling, again, that merciful weight of a gun with all its bullets still tucked like flower buds in the fist of a curious child. If there is a way to get your paper in America without knowing that the getting of your paper might kill you, then I don't want to know it. My boys hustled because our parents came home and sat in driveways with the car engine still on, like they were daring themselves towards another, better highway. The shot I crave is the hustler reaching into their pockets and pulling out an entire block's worth of balled up bills, someone's insurance money that just came in but not for long, someone's college fund for the kid who fixed their jump shot when the recruiters came to town, a fistful of gentle thefts. I want the shot where the hustler pushes the money into another hand and someone who loves them kisses the white ash from their knuckles. I don't know if anyone knows the movie New Jack City, but this is a movie about Nino Brown in the movie New Jack City. All the TV shows are about cops. You are supposed to want Nino Brown dead after the wedding. In the brief moment when he swings the flower girl over his face while the bullets from his enemies make a procession of dust along the chapel steps, when he sets the girl down in front of her dying father, bleeding from a solar system of dark wounds, you might, for a moment, wish for the undercover cop to pull the trigger. But I have loved the dealer who prayed to unzip themselves into a child when drowning in a sea of shouts and sirens. I have loved those who wore soft, red bruises left by handcuffs, like an ancestor's riches. When Nino flings the doors of the van open on Thanksgiving and the hood flocks to get turkeys, the idea is not about goodness. He who feeds the streets must feed the streets. But I most want the undercovers dead when I peep how easy it is for them to slither between worlds, to vanish from the comforts of the state and reappear in an underworld of silk and white powder. The hood cheered when the plainclothes cop threw Nino from the penthouse balcony and into the pile of trash bags, his bloodied mouth whimpering through the metaphor. Consider the moment of the cop, mask off, whispering, "I want to shoot you so bad, my dick's hard," with a gun shaking inches from the dealer's face. And so it seems desire is the axis. The child trembling inside all of us, screaming at whatever we've become. All the TV shows are about cops. The psychic with the glowing window next to the pizza shop tells me the thing about the end of the world is that it already happened before you were born. So I wander through the poisoned leaves of the forest. From my bare cupped hands, I drink from the brown river that divides downtown Columbus between the haves and the have-nots. It is easy to understand why America so loved the photo of tear gas winding its way around a season's greetings hanging over a street in Ferguson, packed with cops in riot gear. Somewhere beyond the baton severing of winter's chill and the glass being kissed into webs, one might be able to imagine a family placing boxes underneath a tree, wearing matching sweaters and watching another movie about ghosts. America loves its contrasts, but never its history. The blades that feast their way through the tree's bark remember only the sweetness of collapse, not the joyful gathering, not the ornaments hand-painted by someone who survived the riot generations before the one howling at these doorsteps. Greetings to this new season of the bandana in the back pocket, and then swinging from a once familiar face. I breathe in the scent of my own living to avoid the cars on fire, the way the eyes burn themselves shut. A seasonal greeting to the way my heart ghosts its own rhythm when I text, "I love you, please tell me you're safe," and hear nothing back in the time it takes for a person to be cold pulled from a car's open window. To the worry that parks itself beneath the skin of my palms. My homie ran for a fence with a stolen cell phone in his pocket and didn't hear the cop yelling before he heard the gun go off. Or maybe There was no yelling at all. Witnesses say one sound can be swallowed by a louder, more violent ruckus. Somewhere beyond, a family places a box underneath a tree and begins to shovel the already ended earth, wondering if this is all the apocalypse has to offer. I'm gonna read two more, and I'm gonna look forward to hearing Ariana. I like The Wire, the show. I used to rewatch The Wire every year, and then I stopped because I didn't have the time anymore. And also, I don't know. Much like when people like mock people who love Harry Potter by being like, get a new book, I was very much in that. I was like, get a new show. You know, I can only quote The Wire so many times. But there's a scene in The Wire that is now kind of infamous where during a raid, another weird thing about webinar type shit is that like, you can't see the audience, so you can't be like, there's that thing where you explain something, you see someone in the audio, you like make eye contact and like, that person knows what I'm talking about. But that isn't happening here. But there's an infamous scene in The Wire where one of the cops, Carver, during a raid, jumps on top of a car and gives this like really forceful monologue. And I used to think that scene was so cool. And I rewatched The Wire maybe a couple years ago, and I watched that scene and I was like, yo, this is kind of horrific. You know, he's like, I don't know. So this poem is about that scene. All the TV shows are about cops. You can always tell which police officer is supposed to be the cool one by the way the cigarette dangles between their cracked fingers, or by the way the cigarette smoke dances along a diamond ring, or by the platinum chain their badge swings from, by the whip they push through the back alleys they grew up on. You can tell the cool cop by how they know the older brothers of the dope boys and don't drop government names when yelling out a tinted window, how they keep the elbow angled just right when shooting ball, the way coaches who circled the hood taught them on a court lined with needles and broken glass. You can tell the cool cop by the way they eyeball the stash. Don't even need to keep a scale. Say fuck the interrogation. There is no truth that doesn't reflect itself in blood. Can tell by the song that plays when they put the siren on top of the Benz. Something you maybe heard sliding around along the leather back seat of an OG's ride. Know the exact way to order a sandwich at the corner spot and who to ask for the dirt. It is so seductive to blur the line between beloved and executioner. Not afraid to take the dirty money, as long as street niggas don't forget who ain't doing a bid behind a stray bullet. I admit, back in the day, I loved the moment Carver leapt atop the Nissan Sentra in his black kicks and baggy jeans and offered a sermon of threats to the boys hiding somewhere in the concrete forest, the way his mouth undressed the slang in its familiar comforts when he yelled, "You do not get to win, we do." This is my last one. Although I was doing a bunch of research for these poems, and in case you were wondering, the rapper who has played a cop, who has played the most different cops, different types of cops, is Ice-T. He is also the rapper who has played a cop for the longest. Because Law and Order, it seems, is literally never going to go off the air. Oh, all right, okay, I'll read two more. I'll read like, Ariana just put a nice message in the chat. I'll read two more. I'll read the Ice-T poem. Yeah, all the TV shows are about cops. Ice-T played a cop same year he wrote Cop Killer and posed with a gun pointed at the camera in the liner notes to the first Body Count album. In the camera is the cauldron shaping all our greatest deceptions, wrapped up in the right flow, the perfect scene, the right set of hands slapping out a beat to ride on a lunch table. I am liable to believe anything. I have seen baby-faced killers strapped into the back corner of a school bus seat. I have built the stash house. I have pulled girlfriends out of thin air. And so when Ice-T says, I am not a cop and I am not a cop killer, everything is a role. I do want to believe that he has killed before, or he has at least sold half of what he says he sold. Even catching one body is a disguise that can last the whole lifetime. Ice-T's scowl raining down from behind every album cover and behind every badge. In the show where he plays a cop, Ice-T hurdles himself towards a dealer who is barreling through an empty New York park, and his fellow white officers follow, steps behind. And when the camera snaps to just the right angle, it is impossible to tell who is chasing and who is being chased. I'll read this last one. It's in two parts, so it's like two poems, but thanks for listening, and I'm excited to hear Ariana read. All the TV shows are about cops. Actually, let me drink water before I read this one. I have this water bottle I love, but it's coming. I think it's like its time with me is coming to a close, sadly. It's like very old. I don't know. No one wants to hear about this water bottle, but I'm cherishing it while I still have it. All the TV shows are about cops. I miss ritual more than I miss religion. It is good to have somewhere to be and a song that carries you there, to drift into a dream while bent, face pressed to the ground. The carpet in my grandfather's house smelled like the cigarettes he told my mother he'd long sworn off. Pray not to God, but to the lies your people tell each other to survive. If there is a heaven, let it be a heaven not of people, but a heaven of those lies, breathing beyond the people who told them across the table or gently blew them into an ear, a heaven of cigarette butts in the shape of a heavy white beard, a heaven of cash and cars and gold rings. If my myths outlive me, I carve out a corner of heaven for the lies I've told with a flashlight in my eyes or beaming into my car. I carve out a corner for the way I treated the black judge like kin while he scanned my record and considered a sentence. More than I miss religion, I miss how easy it is to be forgiven when the altar beckons 5 times a day. A corner of heaven for the Arabic I've tripped over on a path to forgiveness. A corner for the imagined friends turning over in my brain during silent prayers, the moans pushed into the worn down prayer rug. Even my pleas are lies. Even when I know what I've done, I can't bring myself to speak its name. No one thinks God would wear a badge or spend a Sunday cleaning weapons while people fainted into the aisles of a church in the name of something holy. I don't believe in God as much as I believe in an interrogation room. I believe in someone placing a loaded gun on a metal table between me and a door. And who gets to be God then? Would God be the bullet or the table or the door? But maybe I'm getting too caught up in the romantics of power. All the police officers from my hood went to church in the mornings and helped old women up the stairs and into their pews before receiving the word. Cleanliness is a soft palm which turns a face towards its righteous path, and so keeping the streets clean is an act of God. No one thinks God would push a face into the mud while saying, "You want to die, nigger," so low the onlookers can't hear. Maybe we're all playing dress up and paying our tithes where we can. Maybe there is no devil and just 100 different ways to be the wrong kind of God. Maybe if enough candles light the concrete's blood, someone might mistake these memorials for prayer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hanif. That was great. I see Ariana clapping. I know everyone else is clapping as well out there. Our next reader is Ariana Raines. Ariana is a poet, Obie-winning playwright, and performing artist. Her books include A Sand Book, the play Telephone, The Origin of the World for the Whitney Biennial, Mercury, Cor de Leon, and The Cow. She's created performances for the Guggenheim and Whitney Museums and many galleries and venues across the world. She was honored this year with the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Prize for A Sand Book, which was also a finalist for Lambda Literary Award and longlisted for the National Book Award. Ariana?
Hey, okay. I've never read in webinar format myself, and I got into poetry precisely because it's not me alone in a box looking at myself on the computer. So I really miss not being able to see your faces, everyone. I just want to say that was an extraordinary reading, and I wanted to hear deafening applause. I hope that you all clapped. I'm a huge admirer of your writing, Hanif. I don't know if you've like left or if you're still here, but
I'm still here. Thank you very much. I'm here. I'm just like muted and, you know, so I'm not interrupted.
That was polite of you. That's a real power move to make yourself invisible. My stupid face emoting while you read is now burned into people's brains. So I'll keep this in mind for next time. I'm gonna give you a poem. I think I'll maybe give two poems from this book. And the one I'm gonna start with it feels like a big risk for me because it's the kind of poem that needs to ride the energy of a physical encounter. But I'll just tell you that Emily Dickinson wrote it for me. She was very kind and easy to work with. She just gave it to me, and she wrote this. And yeah, I guess it's about being made into a spectator or an accessory or an accomplice. A bullet's like a planet orbiting the brain. No heart will go unpunished, though it never enter in. For though it didn't enter, yet it did and does and shall. For though we only saw it, it is moving through us still. A bullet's like a planet orbiting the brain. No heart will go unpunished, though it never enter in. For though it didn't enter, yet it did, and does, and shall. For though we only saw it, it is moving through us still. A bullet's like a planet orbiting the brain. No heart will go unpunished, though it never enter in. For though it didn't enter, yet it did and does and shall. For though we only saw it, it is moving through us still. Because that light was not like the others, making us seem to be becoming a place. And because on a traffic island, the sun had filled me. And because my mother was crazy. And because she was sometimes sane. And because I was in love and then I wasn't in love anymore. And because I was hungry and because I needed to party. And because I was grieving, and because I had studied the Dust Bowl, the architecture at Delphi, Judaic and Islamic legends of Moses, Midianite theology, the history of agriculture, Kundalini yoga, Alan Savory's and competing theories on desertification reversal, ancient and contemporary methods for ruminant grazing, grasslands and myths of grasslands, those Hopi stories that can be found in books, Roman haruspicy, Hellenistic astrology, the life of the Marquis de Sade, one or two novels, one or two volumes of poetry, Bulgarian choral singing, elements of contemporary sculpture, certain Gnostic scriptures, my own appetite, and because you can pay a professional to cleanse you of demons with a chicken egg, and because the air filled first with the odor of cheap men's cologne and then of human excrement over warming Pop-Tarts, and because one morning in Santa Monica, a woman emerging from a store was heard to say, "They don't have guns in the toy store." To which her man replied, "I know." He was seated beside a child, We'll get it in another toy store, said the man. And because an ugly incense was emanating from House of Intuition, and because Kabir wore a feather in his cap and Krishna had one in his turban, and because King Solomon brought peacocks to Piyim in a boat back from Tarshish, and because I fell down sobbing over a beaded cloth, and because what I had for so long failed to see, what I had ignored, mistaking it for ornament, was information hiding in plain sight, and because there was no way to touch what was converging on us, and because once there were oil pits near Arderica and a pitch spring on Zacynthus, and because Iris was the messenger of the gods I'd forgotten, and because the iridescence in the peacock was due to a complex photonic crystal, and because that crystal was silica, and so for the most part was sand, and likewise the stones to which desolate people increasingly communicated their wishes, and because glass was melted sand, and Johnny Cash was attacked by an ostrich, and because pens used to be made of feathers, and because Chopin and George Sand had been miserable on Majorca, and because there were dust storms on Mars and sandstorms in China, and Israel was investing heavily in anti-desertification efforts, and because Papa Doc had shorn Hades' mountains of trees, and when dust from Azerbaijan blew into Tbilisi, I lay with a nihilist in a fenced-in woods, and when strange lights appeared at the height of the spruces, there was dust on our tongues, and because I navigated by the pine cone in my skull, same as everybody else, and because Mozart, no. And because a bird had alighted on the lectern of Bernie Sanders and Mozart kept a sparrow as a pet, and because the mute son of Kenzaburo Oe learned speech from records of birdsong, and because of the bird friends of Odin and Massaw, and because the gizzards of fowl were iridescent, and likewise the pearl, and likewise the viral unicorn frappuccino, and because Big Sur was on fire, and a hot wind was blowing over the Henry Miller Library, and because in Paradise, California, people burned in their cars, and because the bullets kept flying, and because the relentless spread of stupidity was allegorized in Flaubert's novels by grains of sand, and because idiocy came down onto Baudelaire on the wind of a wing, and because the less we could agree, the more it seemed we were evolving into a gem. This actually would have been a part where I would like ask you what you want. Basically, I have some like poems just from like the last couple weeks. They're not done, but maybe I'll read you some. Yeah, okay. You want, okay. I'm getting a yes from this very small quorum that we are as panelists. So sorry to the audience if you don't want to hear my like fucked, not finished poetry. You are hereby invited to mute me if you need to. All right. Hang on a second. This is nice because I can like cover my own face with the poem, which is like a little less traumatic for at least me. These don't have titles. Marine wind, roses looking at the ground, mashed peonies, sirens, two wizening loquat leaves from Julian, drying on the Mustang dashboard, Mustang in the rain, pollen-covered Mustang, Waris who wasn't Waris and training me into 2 hours of sex. My therapist sent me a poem she wrote, a major breach of boundaries. Andrew came in less than 30 seconds, twice. I could not resist mocking him. Now I feel guilty. Julian and I aren't speaking. Kyle is about to enter the National Guard. The National Guard have been withdrawn from Boston. The president has scheduled his rally for Juneteenth in Tulsa. I have been trying to get through to the Jews. I feel a little sick. So I went to the store for cereal, which I seldom eat. Now I'm eating it in my peculiar prism. I almost typed prison. One throw of the dice shall never abolish chance. I've been thinking about the silence of Maya Angelou when she was a little girl, after her rapist was found dead. The voice that splits the heart. I got tired of talking, tired of the sound of lies, almost even more tired of the sound of the truth, slavered over by 1,000 minds, like a rock, washed and rewashed, drowned and undrowned by polluted mineral waves, shining, perseverant in its being worn away, tired of my talent and of my own wound, around which I could not produce language, only a vacuum, a kind of witness, a kind of wetness, a kind of whiteness to wear in me the iniquities of my culture had not only cut me, but extracted my complicity. And when a heart beats for and against itself, the voice is unlikely to rise. And if a voice does yet rise beyond that contradiction toward a continuity with things as smoke bluely makes itself like the tops of the trees. If you ever had the misfortune to come upon an old photograph of me, you would have seen a child and eventually a person generally in the act of trying to swallow her own soul, and occasionally a woman-shaped thing from whose body the soul had been entirely evacuated. Depending on how the picture was composed, you might even be able to glimpse it, that soul, hovering somewhere above and to the left of my head. It was not that I was not living sensitively. It was not that I was not living consciously. It was only that I was traveling so much and carrying around a broken heart, buttressing it almost centripetally with winds and arms, eyelashes, and never over familiar voices moaning in my ear. I didn't realize the motion I was making would produce a wind with the power to blow my essence out of me. Not far out, mind you, just a little ways, just far enough that I could miss it. Just far enough that if you saw me even 2 or 3 years ago and were discerning, you might have noticed. It wasn't that I was ever cherished that way, but I had been cherished enough I could study the good love like that had done you. The good love like that had done you. Okay, wait, let's try that again. It wasn't that I was ever cherished that way, but I had been cherished enough I could study the good love like that had done you. I watched how you shone, and I watched the generosity and radiance you shook from yourself like particles of gold. Since when do I employ such similes? Are these ancient times? Is this ancient times yet? What I'm trying to say is I studied love's effects by parsing the light you gave. And it was into that light I was moving when others first took me for one of the lucky ones. All right. I have no idea how we're doing on time. I could read you one more. What is that permissible? Is it advisable? Okay.
Do it.
All right. 1 second here. This is a poem that I wrote on on December 31st, 2019. So it is an obsolete piece of literature. Ancient, obsolete literature. Oh wait, I lost you guys. I'm like trying to read from 2 different frames. Can you still see me? Okay, cool. It's called Alchemy Forever. I had an experience of a country, which is a place on planet Earth, of wild beauty to which no word in the English language can accurately be appended. It was a romance that I was taken into, which made me wild and humbled me beyond all speech. A legend that grew into facts, ravages of ravages I doubt I will ever be able to speak to. I knelt in love, I crawled for love. I too had had dreams of revolution, but I would not pretend to powers that lord and lady I lacked. There are histories of magic speech that should not be written down. Look, I was a woman with a problem. I did not come all this way to deceive you. It was a problem I could not resolve, and because my problem was unsolvable, I was shown miracles. Impossible things were shown to my naked eye, as if to say, the resolution of your problem is not the purpose of your errand. Your problem produces heat in you, intolerable heat you have converted to prayer. And I, girl, am the issue of your prayer. Woman, I am the issue of it. But it was not your prayer that made me. After my ex and I had talked and couldn't communicate because a sugary form of narcissism had crisped all over everything we said, like candy on a halo, old candy you'd have to suck a long time or bite to get through. And I had lost my appetite for this adult candy of my condition and your condition and my worth and your worth, as the great telescope of obscurity peeped the immensity of garbage that is the product of the loneliness of the hungry adults of Earth. After my ex and I had failed to get through to one another, an online course led by a sexy hostage negotiator was advertised to me. And while I packed and went about my pre-holiday duties, I listened to 3 or 4 videos of him talking. He has a lazy eye I find troublingly alluring. The way he pronounces hostage is unique. Every time he says the word, he says it like hostage. The way when someone is hot, people sometimes lean very hard on the start of the word so that its heat seems almost the arousing phenomenon singed by the H itself. Sometimes I think the phoneme ha, but is phoneme the word for this? Has something to do with the heart of God. Ha. It's the syllable that restored virility to the body of Abraham. Sometimes I think it's the joke behind Harvard. Did you know hardly anything is known about John Harvard? Well, he does look handsome as a statue. A bust of him loomed on a high mantelpiece under which I watched Bernadette Mayer and Fannie Howe discuss money, how in their youth they and their friends never cared about it, and how in those days doing things for the money was unheard of. I used to think you could live without money, said Bernadette. You can't. Since I can't get away, I'll change or something. This won't be my favorite poem in the whole world. Telephone opened early in 2009, just after the financial crisis. Now that makes a decade. It won Obies, had a sold out run, and that year was also my first time teaching poetry. My job was hallway poet at UC Berkeley. Therefore, what's ending is my first decade of full adulthood. When success type things were first being offered me, I found it hard to grasp. My inclination was to run, and frankly, it still is. There's a stack of electric feelings sitting on these 10 years that is also sitting on your stack of years that makes it feel unlike any other 10 years that I've ever lived, that I've ever tried to take a good, honest look at. It has to do with a sensation of having fought lovingly to behold, notice, apprehend, and adore what lived through me all this time, while having also often found myself more like a specimen under surveillance by me, myself, in partnership with outside forces to which I had never given my consent, even though I signed the terms and conditions and all the privacy policies, all only apparently benign and never neutral. I was as a drop of pond water pressed between rectangles of glass. It feels weird to try and say what mattered most to me during these years. The facts we move through are the outcome, I guess, and we avert our eyes from most of them of what we felt. But I want so desperately to be human. And the longing in me to keep the best of the truth secret from you is also strong. And yet I so dearly want to know you. Continual surveillance is its own kind of feeling, coupled with the catastrophes and the lives of many of the people I've loved best. There's a hellacious ethics to no escape. I have liked to lose myself in labor. Apart from loving, the pleasure of disappearing into people even more fucked up and always more beautiful than me. What a relief. The idea of flight or perpetual motion is what I'm trying to speak of, which in a novel would be the form called picaresque. How to keep moving while abjuring the notion of escape. I didn't take refuge in some Berlin. I felt it my duty to be American because I don't know how to be, and because the very thought of it hurts me. But if I'm going to be here enjoying as I can my great complicity with you and billions of us and what won't let us live, my heart, I can at least sober up this poem. The eye of things is everywhere. I had to run through the culture to get beyond it. There was no way to get around it. I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you so much. And this is a reminder for our audience. We have a few minutes that are going to do a Q&A. And this first one kind of hits on, you shared in progress, these fresh poems. And Hanif, you're sharing something that's new. And so question was, they just wanted to hear from both writers on their process from inception through revision.
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes per poem. For me, at least, changes per poem or per mood or per project. For these poems, a lot of the work is kind of coming to life through revision. So, I kind of map these out by making a list of police shows that I watched growing up, and mapping those shows onto moments of protest, moments of anxiety, moments of like scenes I'd remembered, and trying to write into that. And through the revision, I think, is where the work has gotten clearer for me generally, because I've been trying to rely on my memory, particularly for this one, my memory by itself, which is faulty. The thing that I tell people all the time is that I think it'd be useful if more of us spoke about memory as though it's a privilege, not just a privilege to be able to access our memories, but also a privilege to be able to approach our memories without trauma, to have memories that you hold close and not have traumatic relationship with them. And so when I am being heavily referential as I am in this work, and I'm relying entirely on my memory and I'm not looking at anything when I'm drafting, that means the revision is where the poems really get their body and their clarity, because I am, in effect, relying on the faultiness of memory to build the draft, and then I'm relying on some certainty to offer stability to the work, which is how a lot of my nonfiction comes to life, but doing it in the poem feels really refreshing.
I just love hearing you, Hanif, talk about that, because my experience of your writing is that there's this incredible music and associative, like, internalness that I find so healing and comforting, and yet there's like a grief and a reality that gives it this ground and stability. So it has this extraordinary quality to me. Sorry, I'm like, I don't know if I'm like going off script, but like, it's just cool to get to hear how you compose, because I don't know how I compose. I mean, I'm a like, there's like constructors who like are sculptors more, and I occasionally I sculpt afterwards, but I'm like I write from a musical experience, and I do sometimes have sort of mediumship type experiences where somebody else, I feel, composes the poem for me. I have this poem that I'm a bit embarrassed by it because T.S. Eliot helped me to write it, and he's a difficult, you know, he's not necessarily the one you want coming over. You know, but he has certain things, certain areas of expertise, I guess. So I tend to like generate a lot of, I guess, flow, but then I will spend a long time on structure and orchestration. Like for this book, for a sand book, which like, and I'm just gonna like get a dig in to the New York Times because they just called me messy today, and I'm really sick and tired of being called messy. I mean, I'm fine that I'm messy as a woman, or I'm a person with guts, but I spent 2 years on the structure of this book, and I take structure very, very seriously because I write in different time signatures and key signatures, and there are poems that like the long one that I read second, like, you know, there are these different rhythms that come through, and they have to be housed without incontinence. Like I want them to be housed in a structure that won't leak. And when you have different forms inside of one book or inside of one person, the structure becomes so eminently important. And I pay a lot of attention to it because it doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. And so but I'm fascinated by it, like as orchestration and as music. Like if there's gonna be these different registers in tone, if there's gonna be these different flows, then the whole thing has to be orchestrated. And so I'm just like maniacal about that. And that's the part where I become more of like a journeyman or a journeywoman. The nice thing, I guess, about poetry, I write prose too, and I actually kind of have a question for you, Hanif, about this, if I may. Manuel, am I allowed to ask Hanif a question?
Yeah, you're totally allowed to ask him a question.
I personally, I've been writing prose and sort of consciously as a practice, been writing essays for a few years because I wanted to get good at it. And it's only started to become a more pleasurable experience in the last 3 or 4 months. In general, for me, poetry is an absolute total delight to write. It's like, it's already its own gift. Like I don't care about publication or anything else. I just love the act of it. And prose has been a total agony. And I think that like there must have been a lot of blood sacrifice in my lineage or something, because it just hurts me so badly. I love to do it. I'm addicted to it, but it hurts me. And I'm just wondering, Hanif, if it hurts you.
Yeah, well, first I want to say a quick thing about how much because I also saw the thing about calling your work messy and calling other work messy, and I think that was tough for me to read, because when I read Sandbook, and when I especially read your longer poems or your poems that feel as though they're like just making use of a lot of language and a lot of movement, they seem to be the opposite of that. Like sprawl, sure, but they seem so tightly organized, which I don't write many long poems anymore because I lose organization really easily, and I lose control. And I think there's a difference between messiness and a very controlled sprawl, which I think shows up in your work a lot. But are essays, do I find essays agonizing? No, I mean, I was a prose writer long before I was a poet. You know, I came to poetry late, and I came to poetry last in my writing life. And I am often delighted when I approach prose work and nonfiction work, because I'm I find myself most frustrated if I burden myself with the search for answers. Like if I'm sitting down to write and saying, because I'm writing nonfiction or because I'm curious about something, there has to be an answer on the other side of this. I think a few years ago, I just recalibrated myself to say, like, I'm not writing looking for answers, but I am perhaps writing looking for better questions that I can take back into the world and plant some seeds with and find some new curiosities to run into and get better questions. So that really widens my ability to feel satisfied within the realm of nonfiction work, within the realm of prose, because in that way it's freeing. I can kind of go anywhere. You know, I write mostly like small vignettes that kind of travel to a lot of different places at once, and I think it's because I'm trying to turn over as many rocks as I can in the search for some clarity that will lead me to something better. And that in and of itself is pleasurable. Now, sometimes it's the actual work, like word on the page work, not great, of course.
Thank you.
So a couple of questions. Let's see. This one said, I love what Hanif just said about privilege of memory. Do you both feel like your relationship with what's true has changed over your careers, shifted?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, for me, my relationship with what's true has not only shifted, but the relationship with the type of truths I tell has shifted, and the relationship with the types of truth I'm willing to be present within the public realm has shifted. You know, I've written a lot about losing my mother as a teenager, and for so long it dawned on me that, or for so long it occurred to me that my experience of that loss was the experience, right? And I'm the youngest of four. I have a father who also lost a partner. There are people in my mother's orbit who also lost her. And I've begun to think about what it is to privilege my experiences as a way of kind of grasping and clinging to the memories I have. And doing it without even considering that another experience could be possible, right? And for me, it feels a lot more generous to let my memories sit on the page and in my life alongside a possibility of just being incorrect, right? Alongside a possibility of like rediscovering that something that I thought I loved was not as I thought it was, and then having the potential to go along a path where I get a better answer. That said, I mean, you know, a part of writing the Tribe Called Quest book that I really enjoyed was that so much of the research was researching my own memory. And there was some delight in that when I was wrong and when I was right. If I remembered, you know, there was like a freestyle I remember seeing on Young TV Raps when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. And I remembered certain things about that night. I remembered sitting on the floor past my bedtime and listening for my parents upstairs. I remembered the drink in my hand at the time. I wasn't supposed to be drinking soda that late, or all this stuff. But, you know, as the years went on, I was like, shit, did that freestyle actually happen, or am I imagining that? And I can't express the pleasure that it was for me to go online and search for that freestyle video and find it and be like, oh shit, this thing happened. I once lived a life where I experienced this in real time, and it was exciting and thrilling, and people I love were still alive. And so, yes, memory has changed as I've aged, particularly in my work, but there is something really satisfying for me, not even about granular memories, but about those subtle reminders that I once lived a life that was in some ways more full than this one I have in the moment.
I resonate so deeply with so much of what you've just said, and I'm also impelled into writing by the loss of my mother. I'm not saying that's what you said, but I'm just that's the case for me, and the way that my experience seemed to be imposing itself upon me when I was first writing. The act of writing releases me from that tyranny, the tyranny of my own impression and my own narrowness. And I think what's interesting about working with what's true without merely being a documentarian or historian, and yet being one in some sense, a chronicler. and this is one of the things I love about your writing, Hanif, it gives me back my body, it gives interiority back to me when I've lost it. It has that power, and its searchingness is I find that the traumas in my life, and that word is bandied about so much, I find that, working with them plastically, whether it's text on the page or, I did a sculpture collaboration to deal with PTSD from sexual trauma. And I have the making of monuments as a poet who doesn't work in that toil in that realm at all was very interesting, because I discovered that it worked. I discovered that monumentalizing certain horror kind of really took it out of my body in a different way than dealing with the kind of emission of language and moving that around and working with that functions. And I find that because in memoir, or sort of a more prosaic approach to writing, it has a relationship to the past. It's like something happened and then I wrote this thing. And that is a really boring relationship to me. And what is really fascinating is how writing produces the future. And I've noticed in my life that the thing that's changed my life the most is writing. And every book I've ever made, and I never knew that it would do that when I first started. I wrote a book before I knew any poets, and I just sort of felt like I was choking and I had to get it out of me, and I did it. And then it made my life different, and it produced the future. And that is mystical. That's weird. And it turns out that there's this whole relationship to the future that writing has that is very groovy, I think.
Thank you both for sharing about that. Our last question, just as we kind of wrap things up for tonight, how do you find the balance between a poem needing more information to help the reader understand versus when to leave some info intentionally out to keep it mysterious or poetic?
I never withhold for mystery's sake. You can always tell when someone's withholding. But there are sometimes real mysteries. You know what I mean? It's hard to explain, but it's just something I feel.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think all the time about, I talked about this a little bit during my talk yesterday, but the question for me becomes, who is the reader I'm imagining that is gathering the information, right? Because, I mean, to be frank, I grew up from the east side of Columbus, largely Black neighborhood with no bookstores, did not have a library until I was like 11 years old. And those are kind of the folks that I'm writing for. I'm really against explanation. And I'll tell you, I'm against explanation because, again, I came up first as a music critic, and I came up reading music critics who talked to me as though the bands they were writing about were already the loves of my life. You know what I mean? Greil Marcus would write about the Beatles as if I've heard them already. Lester Bangs wrote about the Clash as though I was right there in 1979 with the Clash. And what that did for me was it allowed me the joy of exploration on my own, right? On my own terms. If I felt on the outside of something, I was able to kind of crawl my way towards that something. And that was really joy, that was pleasure giving for me. And so as someone who's like deeply referential in my work, but not only nonfiction, but specifically poems, it feels important to me that if I am withholding from a reader, one, it's not my people. It's not the people I love and came up with and who might read my work and see some of themselves in it, or who might know the monuments that I nod towards in my writing. But also, if I'm withholding anything, it is doing it with an eye and heart towards Well, I hope that if you don't know what this is, you'll crawl your way towards it. And in that crawling, you'll find something you love. And then you'll do something productive with that finding, because that's just how my entire interest in music and the world of music came through that. Came through my family, sure, but also came through reading people writing passionately about some shit they were into that I had no access to. And I wanted access to it. I wanted to see if I could feel the way these people felt about something. And for me, that's the real magic of the poem, is that even if you feel on the outside of it, you maybe don't feel on the outside of desire, of the desire to kind of propel yourself towards a rapturous discovery. And so if there is withholding, it's with that in mind.
Well, thank you both for those thoughtful answers. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank the two of you for joining us tonight for the reading. I was just wowed by both of you, and thank you for sharing works that are new with us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, this was a real honor. Ariana, I'm a big fan of your work, and it was great to hear.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Just as we finish up tonight, I want to invite everybody we have a faculty reading later tonight featuring Khadijah Queen, Juan Morales, R.L. Mazes, and Catherine Trueblood, starting at 8 Mountain Daylight Time. And so I just put the link in the chat, but feel free to join us for that if you have the time. And again, Ariana, Hanif, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.